candidates. You each have 4 minutes to answer the questions that will be posed, and you will each answer the absolute same question. Your Excellencies, with respect and humility, if you surpass the 4-minute mark, myself or my colleague will have to interrupt your response. And this eventually brings us to this moment, ladies and gentlemen, where my colleague and I will open the envelope for the first round of questions.
Thank you, Anita. Merci
thank you very much, Anita, and thank you very much to our candidates who have just introduced themselves to yourselves, members of this public. As my sister has just reminded us, we are going to open, ladies and gentlemen, the first round of questions. We are going to remind all of us that the questions were drafted in English and in French. They were drafted by an independent panel. The envelopes were handed over to us a few minutes ago by Her Excellency Madam Konjit Sine Georges. And immediately with Anita, we're going to select an envelope. Anita, you're going to ask the first question.
Esteemed candidates, your question in English, and after that my colleague here, Fatima, will translate in French. Translating Africa's natural wealth into continental prosperity. Africa has everything it needs to feed her people, educate her children, and take care of her health. Yet, the reality defies this. How will you turn the continent's resource wealth into tangible benefits, reducing debt, ensuring sustainable financing for the African Union, and enabling Africa to control its destiny economically? Also, how will you ensure that the African Continental Free Trade Area achieves its goals?
Excellences, messieurs les candidats, la question en langue française. L'Afrique a tout ce dont elle a besoin pour nourrir sa population, éduquer ses enfants et prendre soin de leur santé. Mais la réalité défie cela. Comment allez-vous transformer la richesse en ressources du continent en avantages tangibles, réduire la dette, assurer un financement durable pour l'Union africaine et permettre à l'Afrique de contrôler son destin économique? En outre, comment allez-vous garantir que la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine atteigne ses objectifs? Et on commence avec le premier candidat de Madagascar. Excellence, vous avez 4 minutes pour y répondre.
This question talks about the hopes. And the first hope is that is contained in Agenda 2063. And we are going to just try and respond to this question. Perhaps not answer it completely, because you can't answer it in just 4 minutes. You can't show academically what it is that we can do in order to respond to this aspiration. So aspiration 1 of Agenda 2063 is growth and sustainable development. Your question is huge. How can a chairperson of the African Union Commission, with very clear terms of responsibility, about 26 of those, and first of all, he or she has to demonstrate leadership characteristics, has to have administrative capacity, has to know protocol, has to be diplomatic. How can such a chairperson respond to such a huge question? I am an economist. I am a finance person by training. I do have some ideas to share. First of all, I can emphasize the importance of continuing to develop the economy at the continental level. You did mention our joint initiative about developing trade through, in theory, liberalization of trade, liberalization of the circulation of persons throughout our continent. In theory, I say, trade can effectively become a source of economic dynamism. I think I understand that we're at about 12.6% of commercial trade between African countries. This is very low. For a continent such as Europe, a continent such as America, they go up to more than 50%. So what we need to do is to continue continue with the efforts that we're doing. There's already a secretariat at the ICFTA. A secretariat, the ICFTA is just a geographical. It's zone. It is the geographical zone. We haven't yet attained this free circulation of trade, but if we manage to ensure that a free trade can happen and can happen very quickly, it is very possible that we shall triple our performance in economic development. I am a farmer. I have a fish and chickens, and at a very small scale. And I support young farmers. And it's very difficult to pretend that one can have a good quality and one can sell the products to the neighbors. People are not able to really exhaust what is available in the market. But free trade is that. It is to learn how to master capital virtues, capitalism. Where do you find money, and what am I going to do to find the money? I think we need to start modestly. We need to start at the level of the local development, so that slowly by slowly, with support from the government and of course the support of the African Union, we shall then at the end ensure that all of the citizens, young, medium-aged, and especially women, can have the opportunity of participating in this large continental market. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
You, Excellency Raila Odinga, first for your answer. 4 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Africa is, of course, the least developed continent by comparison. Look at economic statistics. But this is because there are historical statistics. But this is because there are historical reasons why Africa is where it is today. And we say that Africa does not need to remain here. We need to develop Africa. There are several factors which work against Africa. For example, the international financial infrastructure has worked very much against Africa, because African countries have been made to borrow money at a very high rate of interest compared to other countries of the same status as the African countries. So we need to address the issue of rearranging the international financial infrastructure. That is, I think, one of the major starting points. Now, Africa is the richest continent on the planet Earth in terms of raw materials. But it's a paradox that Africa also is the poorest in terms of living conditions. You say that we need not to remain for perpetually the source of raw materials for industrial west or east, that we need to do value addition to raw materials which are coming out of Africa before we export them. And then we've also said that Africa needs to trade more with itself. There's big potential. Like the African Development Bank today says that 7 out of the 20 fastest growing economies in this year are going to be African countries. That are much higher than Europe. We're only competing with Asia. So it is important that Africa enhances the trade with itself. The inter-African trade today stands at just mere 15%. Now we have the African Free Trade Area organization that was launched now 3 years ago. But not much has been achieved. Some of the reasons are issues that are actually solvable. The non-tariff barriers to trade that have been imposed by respective African countries. Things like standards, which are different from one country to the other country, making it difficult for goods to move freely across the borders. Then modalities of payment. And then the other issue of infrastructure. I worked for 5 years as the African Union High Representative on Infrastructure Development. And here is another problem, because goods cannot move freely because of lack of adequate infrastructure within the continent. Kenya exported tea to Ghana, and it took 3 months of tea to travel from Kenya to Ghana. We have major infrastructure projects, the high-speed Continental Railway, the inter-African highways, Cape to Cairo, Tunis to Cape, Dakar to Djibouti, Dakar, Lagos, Mombasa, and so on and so forth. All these need to be developed. Energy is another factor. Energy is too expensive, but we can reduce the cost of energy and go green in the continent.
Thank you so much, Excellency. Candidate from Kenya. Et à présent, mesdames et messieurs, la réponse de son Excellence, le candidat du Djibouti.
Quand on parle
think about natural resources, and the riches of Africa begins with its people. We have 1.4 billion inhabitants on the continent, and more than 60% of this population is young, between 0 and 25 years. The first wealth of this continent is in its people. We must have the capacity to think about how we can ensure that these people, this population, can benefit not only from the existing wealth, but also add value to that wealth. How can we go about that? Through universal education, quality education in our countries. We should have the capacity of offering our citizens a free education from the primary to the university levels, and ensure that this education is spread in all of the regions of our continent and of our country. We must remove the obstacles to education. The feminine population represents 50.2%. There are still cultural obstacles. There are obstacles to the education of girls. We must concentrate on valorizing our human resources. And then we have fertile land. What are we doing with this fertile land? We are still in many countries using very archaic agriculture. It is time to begin to develop an agriculture that I would call modern. It does exist in many countries. Look, for example, at a country such as Rwanda. Tea and coffee are actually, there's value added locally. Countries such as Ghana, countries such as Cote d'Ivoire, cocoa is transformed locally. Now, these raw products that we sell without adding value, we must be able to add value locally so that we can increase the wealth and also create employment. The transformation of agricultural products is a priority. So today, agriculture in many countries uses biotechnology. It uses the drip system. It uses seeds that are modified, that are quality seeds. Ethiopia uses quality seeds in order to be able to produce maize. Today, Ethiopia produces maize and wheat because of these seeds that are quality seeds. It is important to think about transforming agricultural product in place that will ensure that the people can get out of food insecurity, ensure that there is a specialized agriculture. there has to be areas of specialized agriculture, and that, I would say, is one of the steps that will lead to ensuring that this water can be at the benefit of the population. And then we come to natural resources. I acknowledge the work by President Museveni. He has said that he will not export petrol or gas as long as there will not be a refinery in Uganda. These are the examples from African leaders who take the destiny of their people in hand so that they can actually have value added locally. Now, trade, everybody knows that it is through trade that development happens. Look at China. China and all over the Chinese economy really target production and exportation. When you add value to our products, we can become exporters. Let me talk about tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. That is not the problem. I think that the situation must be to, first of all, protect our wealth by transforming them locally. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf.
Of round one, where I'm happy to announce we have a 5-minute break, and after this break we come to round two. You have been tuned in to us here from